Hey, my friend, on this episode, we're going to talk about food, but what you will learn might shock you a little bit, including learning where your food actually comes from. We'll talk about how the food that you eat could be making you sick and how to eat food to heal your gut, lose excess weight, and lower the risk of disease, all while contributing to a healthy planet. Stay tuned for an exciting episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Ocean Robbins, and we're going to talk about the power of food and a whole lot more. By way of introduction, Ocean Robbins is the author of the newly released book, 31-Day Food Revolution: Heal Your Body, Feel Great, and Transform Your World. He serves as CEO and co-founder of the 500,000 plus member Food Revolution Network, one of the largest communities of healthy living advocates on the planet. Ocean has held hundreds of live seminars and events that have touched millions of lives in 190 nations. His grandfather founded Baskin Robbins, and his father, John Robbins, walked away from the family empire and company to write bestsellers like Diet for a New America and to become a renowned health advocate. Now, Ocean is on a mission to transform the industrialized food culture into one that celebrates and supports healthy people and a healthy planet. Ocean, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Well, thank you so much. It is great to be with you.
So I've been following your work for a few years, and I'm super excited that you took the time to come on the show. You're the grandson of the man that founded the world famous Baskin Robbins ice cream empire. And your dad walked away from all of that to follow his own rocky road, but also to write a book called A Diet for a New America. And he got involved in the healthy eating space from very early on. So please walk us, Ocean, through that journey of how it was for your family to transition from ice cream to healthy living.
Sure, absolutely. So my dad grew up in an ice cream family. He was groomed to one day join in running the family company. And when he grew up with an ice cream cone shaped swimming pool in the backyard and 31 flavors of ice cream in the freezer at all times. But he wanted something different for his life than to invent a 30-second flavor. And he ended up in his early 20s walking away from the family company and the chance to join his dad in running it, to follow his own rocky road, as we say in our family. And he ended up moving with my mom to a little island off the coast of Canada, where they built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food, practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and named their kid Ocean. And they almost named me Kale, by the way, before Kale was cool. Okay. But we did eat a lot of kale and cabbage and carrots and other veggies from the garden. And as I got a little older, we moved to California, and my dad began working on a book called Diet for a New America, which came out in 1987, and it became this runaway bestseller. The media had a lot of fun with the story, and they called him the rebel without a cone. It was this would-be ice cream heir who leaves the fortune and advocates for health. And as fate would have it, one of his many readers ended up being my grandpa, who was practically on death's door in his late 60s. He had serious diabetes, heart issues, and weight issues. His doctors told him he didn't have long to live. He'd already lost his brother-in-law and business partner, Bert Baskin, to heart disease when my dad's uncle, Bert, was only 54. And now my grandpa was in a similar state, and he ended up being given a copy of my dad's book by his doctors, which he read, followed its advice, ended up cutting out sugar, cutting way down on his animal product consumption, eating way more vegetables and whole foods, eating oatmeal every morning for breakfast. And he reversed his heart disease. He reversed his diabetes.
Fantastic.
He lost a bunch of weight. His golf game improved 7 strokes. And he lived 19 more healthy years. Wow. So we really have seen in our family that when we follow the standard American diet, we get the standard American diseases, but we've also seen what can happen when we make a change, like my grandpa did. And, people talk about how hard it is to change their diets, and it's true, of course. But if my grandpa could do it, he had more investment than just about anyone in thinking there's no connection between food and health. He'd manufactured and sold more ice cream than anyone who's ever lived. And, newsflash, ice cream's not a health food, but he also wanted to live. And so he was able to make those changes, transformed his life, transformed his diet, and reaped the benefits. And my dad and I were with him on his deathbed. He was about 90. And he said to us, he said, he told my dad, when you left Baskin Robbins, I'll be honest, I thought you were crazy. He said, but thank God some of us have lived long enough to learn a few new things. And said, thank God you followed your own star. And he looked at both of us and said, I'm proud of you. And, I admire that more than all his business achievements, honestly, because he actually showed an example of how anybody can change. and get the results.
Yeah. What a fantastic story. There's a lot more tidbits you have in your book, which, by the way, is a fascinating read. And we'll get into the book in a little bit. But I want to ask you, Ocean, when you were little in the log cabin, wasn't a part of you more drawn towards joining an ice cream company than living in a cabin and eating kale and whatever other veggies your parents prepared for you?
Well, I will admit that I enjoyed our visits to my grandparents. Ice cream does taste good, and I don't think a lot of kids will argue about that. But no, I grew up loving healthy food. And to be honest, sugar and chemicals tasted weird to me because, and this is the crazy thing, is that when you eat even kale 10 times, your saliva changes. So the first time it tastes bitter, and the 10th time it tastes sweeter because you're actually learning how to develop the proteins in your saliva that break it down and sweeten it up to your taste buds. So our taste buds can evolve. And when kids are raised eating healthy food, then modern industrialized food tastes weird to them. But of course, when kids are raised on the modern industrialized food, then healthy food can taste weird. So it does take some time to adjust. But no, I was always proud of my dad for following his own passion and his own truth. And quite frankly, taking a stand. Some things are more important in life than money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he inculcated that in you from a very early age. And at the age of 16, I believe you started a nonprofit called Yes, where you led transformational events for 650,000 leaders in 65 countries. And you also started the Food Revolution Network with your father to educate consumers about healthy food choices. What led you to that mission so early on in life?
Well, I founded Yes because I was inspired by my dad's example and frankly by my grandpa's legacy of making big impact in the world and wanted to find my own place of contribution. And so our original goal was to mobilize young people to be agents of positive change. I was 16 at the time and I thought, gosh, we have all these beliefs that we're preparing for our future, but if we just spend decades preparing, then it might be gone by the time we get there. So I felt this urgency to mobilize young people to be a part of the solution now. And so we started off with a national tour, speaking to school assemblies across the US. And what I saw as I spoke in schools in 40 states was that a lot of people were scared about their future. And that's true today as well. That most young people look at the world around them and say, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I want to have kids. I don't know what this world's going to be like. I don't know if it's safe to grow into. And that's really scary and demobilizing. But what we find is, and this is still true today as well, that hope doesn't come from passively believing that things are going to get better out there. It comes from what we do. When you cultivate hope, it's actually action that makes the difference. So when you do something positive, the world naturally looks more positive because you're imbuing it with something. And so I say everything that's broken and wrong is actually a call to action. It's actually a call to a place inside us that says, hey, maybe this world does need you. Maybe you got something to do, something to bring, something to give. So that was kind of our message. And as I worked with people all over the world for 20 years, I saw that everybody eats and that what we're eating is having this huge impact on our health and on our planet. And I saw that the American way of producing food with GMOs and factory farms and pesticides, our chemical fertilizers, was spreading around the world. And I saw that the American way of marketing food was spreading with KFC and McDonald's and Baskin Robbins spreading around the world. And as this was happening, all over the planet, hospitals were filling up and waistlines were expanding and people were getting sick with diseases that were unheard of generations previous. And so I realized I've got to go back, starting with the US, and work on food because it's having this huge impact. And I saw how rainforests were falling. Indigenous people were fighting for their cultural survival, whether it's in the Arctic or whether it's in the rainforests. Livestock production is fueling massive overconsumption of resources, which is destroying these people's ability to survive. You know why they're cutting down the tropical rainforests in Brazil right now? Well, two main reasons: to graze livestock and to create land to grow food. What kind of food? Soybeans. For what? For livestock. So if you want to save the rainforests, eat less meat, right? If you want to save the climate, then eat less meat. If you want there to be topsoil and water for future generations, eat less meat. If you want there to be enough food for everybody on the planet, eat less meat, because it takes 12 pounds of grain or soy to produce 1 pound of feedlot beef in the United States today, because 80% of the world's agricultural land is going to livestock production. If just theoretically the whole world went vegan tomorrow, we'd save an area of land equal to the US, China, the European Union, and Australia combined. That's how much land we'd save instantly. We could use that to grow food for future generations of humans. We could use that for wind farms and solar farms. We could use that to give land for people to become farmers who want to grow food and need a piece of land to do it on. We could do so many cool things. But we can never do any of that when we use all of those resources for livestock production. So that became my passion. I launched Food Revolution Network with my dad in 2012. And, our mission is healthy, ethical, sustainable food for all. We've grown actually now to over 700,000 members. We offer online courses and food revolution summits, and of course, my book, and lots of resources, thousands of articles on our website. And our goal really is education and advocacy. We want to help empower individuals to take charge of their health and life destinies. And we also want to empower everyone to be agents of change, because you know what? We need a food revolution, which means we change the way we grow food, change the way we process it, and change the way we consume it. And the benefits of this revolution are that we can save trillions of dollars in medical costs. We can save millions of lives, and we can help save our planet.
Yeah, fantastic. There's a lot to unpack there, Ocean. Your passion shows through. So thank you for doing what you do. And you touched on re-exporting this standard American diet to other countries. And I've traveled quite a bit. I've been fortunate. And I see KFCs and McDonald's as status symbols overseas, where
yes,
the people that have money want to go eat at KFC. And I go, we don't even go eat at KFCs in America. Like, why are you trying to, go there? But it's just the marketing of it that's so appealing to these folks.
Yes.
And then, so coming back to what you said, I think what I love most about your work, Ocean, is that not only you've written an amazing book, by the way, this book is detailed. It talks about pretty much everything you'd want to know about food. It breaks down individual foods, food groups, and it talks about what we're doing to the environment, like the relationship with the food to our planet, with CO2 emissions, global warming, GMOs, how food affects communities, and links to social injustices. And the great part about all of this is that not only are you educating people, but you're also changing advocacy. You're advocating and changing global policy at a global level, which is no small feat. So congratulations and kudos to you.
Thank you.
So we talked about your book, The 31-Day Food Revolution. Tell us more about this book and what you hope to achieve with it.
Well, my grandpa started 31 flavors, and the idea was an ice cream flavor for every day of the month. And so I figured, why not focus on 31 steps to health, which in the long run can bring you more pleasure and more satisfaction even than 31 flavors of ice cream. And so every chapter in 31-Day Food Revolution, there are, of course, 31 chapters. Every chapter ends with simple action steps you can take to apply what you're learning in your life. And there are 4 major parts to the book. Part 1 is detoxify, and that's where we focus on getting rid of the bad stuff and clearing out the space in our lives so that we're not taking in foods that make us sick. Part 2 is nourish, and that's how you say yes to the good stuff, the foods that have been proven in tens of thousands of studies to be beneficial for fighting heart disease and cancer and Alzheimer's and type 2 diabetes and obesity, and helping you feel better and have more energy and better sleep and a better sex life and more joy. And then part 3 is gather, and that's where we look at the social side of food, how we can build healthy, thriving communities and relationships. And this is where I think a lot of food and diet kinds of books really miss the mark, because they look at us as isolated consumers, but we're herd animals. We're creatures of connection. We are social creatures, and we love doing things together. And we're far more likely to be successful if we do things together. If you think about how we throng for concerts and family gatherings, and we do things ritualistically, and other people pull us into them. And if you ever had anybody you love sort of pull you off track, you know what I'm talking about. But you can also be a good influence on people. And so here we look at how you can develop the practices that enable you to be a champion of healthy food in the lives of the people you love without pissing people off, without coming off like a nag, and also how you can get yourself the support to sustain and thrive. And then part 4 is transform. And that's where we look at the political, the activist kind of side, and we look at how we change the world, because our current food system is setting us up for suffering and disease, but something very different is possible. And, one of our big priorities in Food Revolution Network is how we can expand the food revolution to reach everybody. Everybody deserves access to healthy food for their families. Everybody deserves the knowledge they need to know what to do so that they can live well and long and prosper. And yet right now, unfortunately, the knowledge isn't universally shared and the access isn't universally shared. So a lot of people live in food deserts. A lot of people don't have the time or the money to eat well or even to learn about all this because they're struggling. If you're working 2 jobs and you're trying to stay afloat and you don't have any time to cook and you don't have any know-how and you don't have the money to buy fancy stuff or to eat at restaurants, what are you going to do? You're often stuck with fast food and with junk food. The cheapest calories are, fried chips and cookies and things like that, but they're not healthy and you're not getting real nourishment. So a lot of people are calorie overloaded, but nutritionally starved because they're not getting the vitamins and the minerals and the phytonutrients they need. So they're chronically hungry. So then they pile in more, and that creates a vicious circle feedback loop where the body actually gets addicted to junk food and the pounds pile up. This is super, super, super common. 70% of us in the US are overweight or obese. So we're saying, hey, you can turn all that around, but we need to change the systems so that it's easier for everyone to do the right thing. In the current context, it's kind of like you're being fined for wearing your seatbelt. If you want to do the right thing, you've got to pay extra, work extra hard, and fight against social pressures and swim upstream. Why not turn that around so that we create systems that make it easier for everybody to do the right thing? I'm all about freedom of choice. People should be able to eat what they want. If they want to give themselves a heart attack, you have an inalienable right to do that as far as I'm concerned. But you should be informed about the impact of your choices, and you should have choices that you can make. I don't want to see anybody who's out of options, and the only way they can feed their family is to go to 7-Eleven at 1 o'clock in the morning after they finally get off work and buy some junk food. I want them to have the option to be able to do the right thing so their kids can grow up with the nourishment they need to make it through school and perform at their best. And so we're focusing on that by looking at a few key policies. One is we want to end government subsidies of junk food. So that if we're going to subsidize anything, we subsidize healthy food. Right now, taxpayer money is going towards
that's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, we're bringing down the price of so-called commodities crops, corn and soy and wheat mainly. Mm-hmm. And so functionally, we're driving down the price of white bread, of high fructose corn syrup, and of factory farmed meat, because most of that corn and soy is going to livestock. Mm-hmm. And we're not subsidizing fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and the things we should be eating more of. So we create a marketplace distortion. And I don't care if you are a free market capitalist or a government intervention loving socialist. We should all be able to agree that subsidizing junk food is wrong. Right. There's no place for that. Mm-hmm. If we're going to subsidize anything, let's subsidize healthy food for the communities that really need it. If we just make that one simple pivot of reallocating those resources towards the healthy foods for low-income communities, we could change the whole game.
Ocean, you've talked about this in your book. Why are these junk foods being subsidized by the government?
Well, it all comes back to our political process. The United States, the first caucus state for sort of the rite of passage for anyone to get their party's nomination is Iowa. Well, guess what? Iowa's dominated by farmers. Mm-hmm. And so people of both parties sort of have to swear loyalty to the industrialized agriculture industry. Iowa's full of feedlots for livestock. Mm-hmm. and concentrated animal feeding operations and people who are in those industries. And so our political process is remarkably corrupt in terms of backing the status quo, and there's not a big lobby for organic broccoli farmers, right. But there's a big lobby for genetically engineered, corn and soy. There's a big lobby for the factory farming industry because these are big operations with big money. And so unfortunately, they can spend and allocate votes and mobilize populations within those specific constituencies. So, that's kind of how it came about in the US, but it's not just in the US. This is a dynamic throughout the industrialized world and many countries around the world. It's estimated that, in at least 40 industrialized countries, that the average there's about a 40% marketplace manipulation of food costs by government that always favors the commodities crops against the so-called specialty crops. Specialty crops are fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds. Those should be the basis of your diet. They shouldn't be a little sideshow. But unfortunately, that's not how it's working. And, the idea of supporting our farmers is a good one. The idea of supporting staples and investing and making sure that our country can eat by investing in insurance and other resources to help farmers grow food is a good one. But shouldn't we be making sure that we're not leaving out the farmers who are growing the food that we need to eat the most of instead of relegating it to some little side dish? I think we should, right? And so that's one piece. Number two, we have a SNAP program in the US. Most developed countries and many other countries as well have food aid programs for the poor. In the US, we have 50 million Americans that depend on this, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, to feed their families.
Wow, that's a big number.
That's right. It is a big number. And unfortunately, most SNAP dollars are going to soda pop and chips and crackers and junk food, white flour, white sugar, etc. And very little is going to healthy food. And then we wonder why these communities that are dependent on those resources are starving for nutrients and are so often overweight and obese and are suffering from so many chronic health problems. Well, a lot of it comes down to this. The SNAP dollars are primarily being used at 7-Elevens and convenience stores and liquor stores, because a lot of the people who depend on them live in so-called food deserts. They don't have access to even supermarkets in their community. And because they're often in desperate straits. And let's face it, the cheapest calories are also the junkiest calories. Again, coming back to the subsidies issue, Twinkies has 14 subsidized ingredients. Broccoli has none. So we face this, and then here's what we could do. I'm not interested in saying, okay, let's say that, you can't use SNAP dollars for this or that. Why don't we just double the value for fruits and vegetables? And that's being piloted. Wholesome Wave is piloting this in certain communities. In 20 states, they have pilot programs reaching 500,000 Americans right now. And they're finding that when that happens, people buy more fruits and vegetables, they eat more fruits and vegetables, and they're healthier because of it. So what would happen if we rolled that out on a national scale? Instead of 500,000, we made it available for 50 million, 100 times more. Then what would happen? Well, we'd see a healthier population. We'd slash our medical care costs. Long term, we'd help do something about the gap between haves and have-nots, because at the end of the day, this is a strategic investment. It's not just about the dollars for food, it's about the dollars for health. And when you uplift the health of the most struggling, marginalized communities, you decrease medically induced bankruptcies in those communities. You increase the likelihood that parents will have something to give to their kids when they die, because they won't have spent it all on out of control medical costs for the last 10 years of their life. They won't have been on diabetes meds their whole lives. Their kids will have a better shot at making it in school, because they'll have clear minds, because they'll be fueled by real food. So there's all kinds of wonderful things that can come out of this. And then thirdly, produce prescription programs. So this is where doctors prescribe fruits and vegetables and other wholesome foods to their patients, not just drugs and surgeries. Well, guess what costs more? What costs more, drugs or vegetables? Drugs do. Drugs do, unless insurance pays for it. Well, what if insurance pays for the vegetables when the doctors prescribe it? So and what if Medicare and Medicaid pay for the vegetables? It's a lot cheaper to buy food from Mother Earth than it is to buy drugs from pharmaceutical companies. And it could do a lot more good for people, because it wouldn't just solve one problem, it would solve all of them. See, if you drive your car into a brick wall, the cause of death on the death certificate might be impalement by brick wall, but really it was bad driving. Well, our diet doesn't just cause heart disease, it also causes cancer. It also causes diabetes and obesity and dementia and autoimmune conditions and so many other problems. So when you clean that up, you address all of these issues at once. That might be hard to fit on a insurance reimbursement form, because they're trained to just give drugs for one thing, not for everything. But if we can get this passed, we could uplift the health of so many people. And when doctors prescribe something, patients are way more likely to do it, particularly if it's paid for by insurance companies. Right now, a lot of doctors tell their patients to eat better, but they kind of roll their eyes, and internally they're thinking, well, good luck with that, because they know it's not going to happen. Because just being told to eat better doesn't do crap for somebody. Give them a prescription to go pick up free fruits and vegetables and some recipes for how to use them. You can change their life. So these are the kinds of programs that I think could make such a difference so rapidly, that could be revenue neutral or positive in the long run, because we'd save so much. We're spending trillions of dollars on disease symptom management. We call it healthcare. It's not. It's managing the symptoms of disease. We can save all that money or most of it, if we focus on prevention. An ounce of prevention is truly worth at least a pound of cure.
Ocean, when are you running for president? Because I would vote for you. This is fantastic. And you're talking deep policy and huge structural policy changes that would need to be made for these, because like you said, there is lobbying power that these existing industries have. It would mean passage through Congress and Senate, and the president now vetoing it. So you have to almost have to be king for a day to pass all this stuff instead of even being the president, because it's very complicated. But I love your ideas. Now, I want to ask you one question. We can talk about advocacy some more, but I do want to ask you, this health advice is really confusing for people that, like you said, are working 2 jobs, they have kids to take care of, and they're just stressed out of their minds. They just don't have the time to be reading up like 6 books to find conflicting advice. What advice or set of principles do we generally agree on in terms of these are the types of foods that are healthy regardless? What can you give us in a minute or two?
There's a lot of industries and a lot of people making a lot of money off of pushing fads. A friend of mine, Dr. David Katz, was the medical correspondent for Good Morning America for a number of years. And while working there, he was forbidden from ever covering the same story twice, which functionally meant that it was fine to talk about a new fad diet, but he couldn't do a story on why eating whole foods, plant-based diet was good for your health ever again, because he'd done that once. Been there, done that. Don't care if it was 3 years ago. No wonder people are confused. Right. The media is focusing on if it bleeds, it leads. And if it's news, then it sells. Well, guess what? The human body has certain foods that are best for us. And once you've heard that about 10 times, it gets old. So they have to come up with all this new crap to sound like sensational and different and some new fad gimmick, and don't eat anything but fruits and vegetables before 5 a.m. and then, do watermelon and grapefruit juice till noon. And I mean, we get all these crazy ideas, about what you should do and how you should only eat protein, only eat carbs, only eat fat. It's crazy. What we need to do is really simple and really clear. We need to eat more whole plant foods, particularly vegetables and fruits, but also whole grains, nuts and seeds, and for most people, legumes. Base our diet around that. Eat less sugar, animal products, and processed junk in general. If you're going to eat animal products, make sure they come from animals that ran around, that saw the sun, that knew what grass looked like, that were pasture raised or grass fed. There's a lot of greenwashing out there. Just because it's organic does not mean that the animal lived a natural life. It just means they ate organic feed and a few other basic things, and they weren't pumped full of hormones or antibiotics. They still may have lived in terrible quarters, miserable, cooped up, and never seen the sun or a blade of grass in their life. So you want pasture raised or grass fed or wild if you're going with fish, if you're going to eat animal products. And if you aren't, then great, just eat all plant foods. That works too. And that's the bottom line. It's pretty simple. We want to get away from bottled oils, particularly high omega-6 bottled oils like canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, corn oil, and soybean oil. If you're going to eat any oils, make it olive oil or avocado oil or flaxseed oil if it's raw. And we want to move away from oils in general and get our fats. Healthy fats are really important. Get them from nuts and seeds and avocados as much as possible. Olives are great. Little olive oil, all good. Little avocado oil, fine. Don't make it the basis of your diet, but you can include some. And eat lots of legumes in the blue zones, the places where people traditionally live the longest and healthiest lives. There's one food group they all consume in all of these regions, and that's legumes. So there's a lot of benefits to legumes. They're super high in fiber. The average American gets less than 15 grams of fiber a day. The average American needs 30, maybe 40 grams of fiber a day. So we're getting like half of it. Only 5% of us are getting the recommended amount. And the recommended amount is probably too low. So we need a lot more fiber. Guess what fiber does? It feeds the good bacteria in your gut. So if you want a healthy gut, everyone's talking about the microbiome. Well, if you want a healthy gut, to produce the neurotransmitters that make your brain happy, to have the digestion so you get the benefit from the nutrients that you eat, then the cornerstone is to have good bacteria going in there. You get that, you can add good bacteria with probiotics, but they'll all starve to death unless they have something to eat. So the best way is to nurture the good guys that are already there, primarily by eating prebiotics. And that's basically fiber. So lots of fiber is pretty awesome. And whole plant foods are rich in fiber. There's no fiber in any animal products. There's no fiber in bottled oils. There's lots of fiber in all whole plant foods. So that's pretty much the cornerstone. Vegetables are packed with all kinds of antioxidants and flavonoids and other phytonutrients that fight cancer, that boost brain health, that support heart health, that are good for your cardiovascular flow throughout your entire system. They fight aging and, good stuff. So that's the basics. And then I would add one more layer, which is conscious sourcing. It matters where your food comes from and how it was grown. And so, going organic, if you can afford it, is a great move. If you can't, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. If you're choosing between an organic donut and non-organic kale, go for the kale. But if you can afford to go for organic kale, that's great. You'll have less pesticide exposure in your diet, and you'll be contributing to less pesticides in the world. Again, if you're going to eat animal products, make sure they're not from factory farms. Make sure they're from animals that were pasture raised or grass fed, and go for a fair trade if something's coming internationally, if it's bananas or mangoes or whatever else that's coming from elsewhere in the world. Fair trade certified really matters for coffee, for sugar, if you do eat that, for chocolate, because there's a lot of exploitation in the agricultural industry. And if you can buy local, that's great too.
Yeah. These are fantastic tips. I think, Ocean, it's easy to follow for a lot of people. And you touched on blue zones. We've learned so much from these folks that routinely live over 100 years old of age and more, because they've been through it all. They've been eating legumes and beans and mostly plant-based foods. So yes, there might be new fad diets that come out every couple of years, but none of them have stood the test of time like we just described in a minute ago. So in terms of organic, completely hear you. And in your book, you also write, if you couldn't eat all organic, here's some of the dirty dozen or others that you might want to exclude from your diet, meaning don't eat these 12, which are the worst offenders when it comes to organic. So people can read the book and get some of that information as well. Let's touch on GMOs, Ocean. GMOs are genetically modified crops, and the government say they're okay. The manufacturers, the government say they're pretty good. Food industry says they're great. Some of the health experts on the other side think they're all killing us. So what's your take on GMOs, and how should we approach this sensitive topic?
First of all, what's a GMO? Some people think it means God move over, but it doesn't. It means genetically modified organism. God move over. And, Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, and the other big agrochemical companies behind this technology, promised the world that GMOs would bring us bigger yields, more drought-resistant crops, better flavor and nutrition value, and less pesticide consumption. So what we've seen so far, 30 or so years into the mass cultivation of GMOs, is we've got none of those things. Studies tell us that we're not getting better yields, we're not getting more drought resistance, we have no improvement in flavor or nutrition, and we're getting a net increase in pesticide consumption on GMO crops. So what are we getting from these crops? Well, two traits, essentially. Number one, many of them are pesticide producers, so they actually produce the insecticide Bt in every cell of the plant. This means that when a bug takes a bite, their stomach splits open and they die. Yikes. Which does, for those crops, they don't have to spray them with pesticides as much because they're living pesticide factories. Right. But they also have Bt in every cell of the plant, which you can't wash off. And Bt is probably safe for humans, but we're not completely sure. And some people fear that it could impact gut bacteria negatively. And we're certainly seeing a lot of digestive problems since GMOs came on the market. Number two is glyphosate. So these have been engineered to be resistant to herbicides like glyphosate, which enables farmers to spray the fields and kill the weeds, but not the plants. Unfortunately, on the con side, glyphosate turns out to be a probable carcinogen, a known endocrine disruptor, and get this, it's been patented as an antibiotic. So when people are eating glyphosate, they could be messing with their endocrine system, they could be increasing their risk of cancer, and they could be upsetting their gut microbiome and potentially killing good bacteria in there. And so personally, I want to be glyphosate free. And I also am concerned about the buildup of glyphosate in our environment, in our water, in our air, and in the communities that are farming communities around the world. So I want to be glyphosate free, which means I want to be GMO free. So what are the big things if you want to be GMO free? There's a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, you can go organic because all organic food is non-GMO. You can go certified non-GMO, and that's a $40 or so billion industry in the US right now. Or you can just avoid the big GMO crops, which for the most part are going to be corn, soy, canola, sugar beets, which is used for sugar sweetener, and alfalfa, which is generally used for livestock feed, and cotton, which is of course used for clothes, and also for cottonseed oil. So those are the big crops to look out for. And if you go organic with those, and then you're probably non-GMO, or you can just go organic across the board, or again, go non-GMO certified.
And so organic means not GMO, correct?
It does. Organic is non-GMO and a bunch of other stuff. It's also no synthetic pesticides, no synthetic fertilizers, and some other things like that.
Okay, fantastic. The other revelation that I got from reading your book, The 31-Day Food Revolution, Ocean, is that to really guarantee healthy food for yourself and your family, you've got to make an effort. And by that, I mean, you've got to go out there, know where your food is coming from, like you said, sourcing, know where it's coming from, make sure it's clean. And then you've got to almost bring it in and cook it yourself, because preparing it is also very important. You could slip in some of these canola oils or oxidized rancid oils. If you go to a restaurant, you don't know what they're doing. But at home is the only place you can actually guarantee healthy food. And so to me, after reading your book, I'm starting to think that I have to be much more involved in the food that I eat, that I bring home, and stop relying on healthy foods from a restaurant to make up for, my dietary consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, learning to make friends with your kitchen and prepare your own food is an incredibly liberating act, because you then get to choose what you eat, what you support. And the truth is that most restaurants, even the best ones, are under pressure to cut costs and cut corners, and they don't have to share ingredient lists. So if they can throw a little something in there that makes it taste good, and then that increases the marketability and leads to better sales, that's a good business move. So they're under some pressure that may be in conflict with whatever desires they have to serve healthy food for their customers. And they have huge economic pressure as well. So when you're at home, you can take some of the savings that you get from the money you don't spend eating out and invest in higher quality food, which can make a big difference. Eating out at restaurants also comes with a cost. Number one, people forget about the time they spend traveling to the restaurant and coming back, or if they're ordering takeout, the time they spend even going to pick it up. If they're ordering delivery, then they forget about the environmental cost of all those disposable containers and the driving time to bring them the food. If you shop once a week and you cook in quantity and you plan ahead, you can save a lot of resources and you can save a lot of money. Restaurants have to charge for the wait staff and the chefs and the overhead and the kitchens and make some money along with it. So at the end of the day, you're paying for way more than the food. And there are some wonderful restaurants out there. And of course, like anybody, I love patronizing them from time to time. But I want the basis of my diet to come from food that I control and that I can prepare for my family myself. And then we know we're eating really good quality, healthy food every step of the way from top to bottom.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. One last question, Ocean. I know we're coming up on time. Is what I also learned through your book is that being an advocate for cleaner food, for more organic food, or changing how the subsidies are being allocated from the government is an effective strategy that works. There's multiple examples in your book of how the pressure led organizations to, for example, the GMO policy labeling was a fiasco by I believe the Grocery Manufacturers of America that tried to hide GMO labeling on foods. And so how can people be more involved in advocacy for cleaner food and for more responsible food and fair trade practices and all of the things that you mentioned in your book?
Well, every dollar you spend and every bite you take is a vote. Mm-hmm. You're voting for the health you want and you're voting for the world you want. And so it really matters to make that vote a conscious one, an intentional one, and a healthy one. And that's the incredible power you have. You get to be a food revolutionary 3 times every day. You only vote at the ballot box maybe once a year or whatever, but you get to vote so many times, 1,000 times a year with your food choices. And this vote really tangibly matters. You don't have to worry about whether or not it's being counted, because let me tell you something, your body's keeping score. Mm-hmm. Your body knows whether you're feeding it the right food or not, and it cares. And every bite matters. It knows whether it's getting the nutrients it needs. Your brain knows if it's getting the nutrients it needs to think clear thoughts, to think happy thoughts, to think fulfilling thoughts. Your legs know if they're getting the energy to really thrive and have bounce in your step, or if you're just kind of dragging through the day because you don't have the nourishment you need. So when you eat the right foods, you actually are sending a signal of love and respect to your whole body. You're giving your body the nourishment that it needs to thrive. And you're also standing for a brighter future where everybody can have food for their families, where there's a healthy world for future generations. So welcome to the food revolution, and let's do this together.
That's fantastic, Ocean. Thank you so much for writing your book. I highly recommend everybody listening to this or watching this, go get a copy of that book immediately. It's at 31dayfoodrevolution.com. Also, Ocean has been doing Food Revolution Health Summits for the last 10 years, and he brings together a lot of experts that share a lot of areas of food preparation, but also how you can eat healthier foods and affect policy on a global level. So go to www.foodrevolutionsummit.org to make sure you sign up for Ocean's Summit and attend and get the information that you need from there. Ocean, is there any other place that people can go to get a hold of you or learn more about you?
Go to foodrevolutionsummit.org. That's a great place to sign up for the summit and jump in and experience all that we're doing. You can also go to foodrevolution.org to check out our website, our blog, online courses, master classes, and resources, all designed with one purpose. We want to help you be a part of the solution for your life and for your planet. And so I thank you so much, Faraz, for the opportunity, and everyone listening for your time and your attention. Let's do this.
Fantastic, Ocean. Thank you again so much for coming on, and thank you for doing what you do, and that not only changing the world and our eating habits, but also changing public policy so that we live in a cleaner, better world. So thank you very much.